I'm Abigail, 32 years old, and as I pull up to the grand estate where my sister Chelsea's wedding is taking place, my stomach tightens with a mix of dread and excitement. 3 weeks ago, I overheard her telling her bridesmaids that I had to borrow money just to make rent. She laughed when she said it, her voice dripping with pity and superiority. What Chelsea doesn't know is that I've been keeping a secret, one that's about to change everything. I adjust my outfit one last time before stepping out, ready to silence them all. Before I tell you how I silence my sister and her wealthy friends, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family drama and sweet revenge. Growing up in the suburbs of Boston, Chelsea and I shared a bedroom with floral wallpaper and a window that overlooked our modest backyard. 2 years my junior, Chelsea always had a competitive streak that defined our relationship from early on. Where I was content building forts from blankets and reading books past my bedtime with a flashlight, Chelsea was organizing neighborhood talent shows where she could be the star. Our parents both worked hard to give us a comfortable middle-class life. Mom as a high school English teacher and Dad as an accountant at a local firm. We never lacked necessities, but luxuries were carefully budgeted. Chelsea seemed to resent these limitations from an early age. When I grow up, I'm going to have a huge house with a swimming pool and a closet just for shoes, she declared at age 10, flipping through a fashion magazine she'd convinced Mom to buy. I was more practical, more creative in my approach to life. While Chelsea begged for brand-name clothes and the latest gadgets, I was happy thrifting unique pieces and saving my allowance for art supplies and books. This fundamental difference shaped us into very different adults. After high school, Chelsea pursued business administration at an expensive private college, our parents stretching their finances thin to support her. I chose the State University with a scholarship to study graphic design and digital art. Chelsea viewed my choice as settling for less. She never said it directly, but her expressions when I announced my college plans said everything. State school? But don't you want the connections you'd make at a private college? She asked, twirling her hair around her finger. Daddy, can't you help Abby go somewhere better? Our paths diverged even further in our 20s. Chelsea landed a marketing job at a luxury brand through a connection from college. She quickly climbed the corporate ladder, her natural charm and ruthless ambition serving her well. I interned at design studios, worked freelance jobs, and slowly built my portfolio and reputation in the digital design world. My income fluctuated while Chelsea's steadily rose. At 27, Chelsea met Richard Williams, heir to a real estate development company and firmly established in Boston's social elite. Their relationship accelerated her transformation into a polished socialite, complete with highlighted hair, designer wardrobe, and membership at the city's most exclusive country club. The first Thanksgiving after Chelsea began dating Richard revealed how deep the divide between us had grown. She arrived at our parents' house in a brand new luxury SUV, wearing a cashmere sweater and diamond studs, carrying a bottle of expensive champagne from our favorite vineyard in Napa. Abby, you should let me take you shopping sometime, she said, eyeing my vintage dress. I know this amazing personal stylist who could really help you pull together a more professional look, especially if you're trying to attract better clients. I smiled tightly, swallowing the retort that formed instantly in my mind. My clients hire me for my creativity, not my wardrobe. Of course they do, sweetie. She patted my arm condescendingly. But first impressions matter in business. Richard always says presentation is 90% of success. Our mother changed the subject quickly, sensing tension. Chelsea, tell us about your trip to the Bahamas. The photos you posted looked incredible. And just like that, the conversation shifted to Chelsea's glamorous life, our parents hanging on every detail of the luxury resort and exclusive beaches. I sat quietly, picking at my food, feeling increasingly invisible. This pattern repeated at every family gathering. Chelsea showing up with expensive gifts, talking about exotic vacations and charity galas, while subtly undermining my achievements and choices. Abby's still doing her computer drawings. She'd explain to her friends if they asked about me, reducing years of professional design work to a childish hobby. What hurt most was seeing our parents' reactions. They'd always encouraged both of us equally in childhood, but now they seemed dazzled by Chelsea's apparent success. Dad proudly introduced her as my daughter, who works with luxury brands, while Mom displayed photos of Chelsea at society events on the mantle. When I landed a major project designing an interactive art installation for a museum, they responded with polite interest. When Chelsea was featured in a tiny local society page for attending a charity ball, they framed the article. I tried not to let it bother me. I loved my work, had good friends, and enjoyed my cozy apartment in a vibrant but not trendy neighborhood. My success might not have been as flashy as Chelsea's, but I was building something authentic and meaningful. At least, that's what I told myself on good days. On bad days, I wondered if maybe Chelsea was right, if I should have chosen a more lucrative, conventional path. Little did I know that Chelsea's disparaging comments and our family's subtle favoritism were just setting the stage for a betrayal that would push me to my breaking point. The real escalation began 3 months before Chelsea's wedding, at our parents' anniversary dinner. Chelsea had insisted on hosting at an upscale restaurant downtown, complete with private dining room and sommelier. I arrived slightly late, having come directly from a client meeting, still dressed in my work clothes, a simple black dress, and flats. The private dining room buzzed with conversation when I entered. Chelsea had invited not just our parents, but also Richard's parents and several couples from their social circle. I immediately felt underdressed among the cocktail attire and flashy jewelry. "Abby, finally," Chelsea called out, waving from the head of the table. She looked flawless in a designer dress, her engagement ring catching the light as she moved her hand. "We were about to order without you." As I took the only remaining seat, beside an older woman I didn't know, Chelsea clinked her glass for attention. "Before we celebrate Mom and Dad's 30 years of marriage, Richard and I have an announcement." She gripped Richard's arm, her face alight with excitement. "We've set a date, June 12th at the Montgomery estate. Only 8 months to plan the wedding of the century." The table erupted in congratulations and questions about venues, dresses, and honeymoon destinations. I offered my sincere congratulations, even as I calculated the expense of being in my sister's wedding party, which I assumed was inevitable. As dinner progressed, I found myself seated near 3 of Chelsea's friends from her country club. They largely ignored me until one asked what I did for a living. "I'm a digital designer," I explained. "I create interactive art installations and user experiences for brands and cultural institutions." "How fascinating," said one woman, Heather, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Is that like making websites?" "Not exactly," I began, but Chelsea interrupted from across the table. "Abby makes those little animations you see on apps and stuff," she said dismissively. "Very creative, but not exactly stable. Right, sis?" Her friends laughed politely while I forced a smile. "Actually, I'm currently designing an interactive projection mapping installation for the reopening of the Contemporary Art Museum." "Sounds impressive," Richard's mother commented kindly. "It's a small project," Chelsea jumped in. "Abby's still building her portfolio." It wasn't a small project at all, but I didn't correct her. Later, while getting drinks at the bar, I overheard Chelsea talking to her friends. "I love my sister, but I wish she'd get a real job. She's 32 and still living like a college student in that tiny apartment. Mom and Dad worry about her all the time. At least she's artistic," one friend offered. "Not everyone can marry well." Chelsea laughed. "True. But can you imagine showing up to networking events in thrift store clothes?" I've tried to help her, but she's so stubborn. I slipped away before they noticed me, hurt burning in my chest. My apartment wasn't tiny. It was cozy and filled with art and books I loved. My clothes weren't from thrift stores. They were carefully selected for comfort and practicality. And my parents had never expressed worry about my career directly to me. The weeks following the dinner brought a flurry of wedding planning activities. As expected, Chelsea asked me to be a bridesmaid, along with 6 of her society friends. "I found the perfect bridesmaid dresses," she announced during our first brunch meeting. She pulled up a photo on her phone of a silk designer gown. "Only $800 each, which is a steal from Marchesa." The other bridesmaids cooed appreciatively while I nearly choked on my mimosa. $800 was my grocery budget for 2 months. Chelsea, that's a bit out of my price range right now, I said quietly. She frowned. It's my wedding, Abby. Can't you just make it work? Everyone else is fine with it. Everyone else had trust funds or executive husbands. I didn't say this aloud. I'll figure something out, I promised, mentally calculating which projects I could accelerate to cover the expense. But the dress was just the beginning. There was the bachelorette weekend in Miami, estimated cost, $2,000. The bridal shower I was expected to co-host, another $1,000. Wedding gifts, hair, makeup, shoes. The list seemed endless. I might have managed it all if disaster hadn't struck. My biggest client, a tech startup I'd been creating an immersive brand experience for, suddenly lost their funding and had to cancel our contract. The project represented 60% of my expected income for the quarter, and they could only pay me for the work completed so far, about a third of the total fee. Suddenly, I was facing not just wedding expenses, but basic living costs with a severely depleted bank account. I picked up small freelance jobs quickly, but payment terms meant I wouldn't see that money for at least 30 days. My rent was due in 10. After sleepless nights weighing my options, I swallowed my pride and called Chelsea. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. Hey, Chelsea, do you have a minute to talk about something important? I'm actually heading into a dress fitting. Can it wait? I closed my eyes, gathering courage. Not really. I'm in a tough spot financially. A major client canceled a project unexpectedly, and I'm short on rent this month. I was wondering if I could borrow $2,000 just until my other invoices get paid. I promise I'll pay you back before the wedding. Silence stretched over the line. You need money? Chelsea finally asked, her voice a mixture of surprise and something else I couldn't identify. Why don't you ask Mom and Dad? They're already contributing so much to your wedding. I didn't want to worry them. Another pause. I'll have to ask Richard. It's our joint account now. I understand. Thanks for considering it. 2 days later, Chelsea transferred the money to my account with a text that read, "Consider it an early birthday gift. Don't worry about paying it back." Relief washed over me, along with a complicated mixture of gratitude and discomfort at being financially indebted to my sister. Still, I sent her a heartfelt thank you message, promising to repay her despite her statement. I should have known Chelsea's generosity would come with hidden costs. A week later, I arrived early to help set up for the bridal shower at the country club. As I approached the private room, I heard Chelsea's distinctive laugh, followed by my name. Abby actually asked me for money last month to make rent, she was saying. $2,000. Can you imagine? 32 years old and can't pay her own bills. What did you do? Someone asked. I gave it to her, of course. She's my sister. But Richard was not happy. He said I need to stop enabling her poor life choices. Will she still be in the wedding? Those dresses aren't cheap. I told her she could borrow money for the dress too if needed. What else can I do? I can't have mismatched bridesmaids. I stood frozen outside the door, humiliation burning through me like acid. Chelsea had not only shared my private financial struggles, but twisted them to make herself look magnanimous while painting me as irresponsible. I pushed open the door, plastering a smile on my face, even as tears threatened. The room fell silent as I entered, 6 pairs of eyes watching me warily. Abby, Chelsea exclaimed too brightly. You're early. Clearly, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I busied myself arranging gift tables, pretending I hadn't heard every word. The shower proceeded with excruciating politeness, but I caught the pitying glances, the whispered comments behind manicured hands. By the time Chelsea opened her 30th gift, another crystal something or other she'd never use, I had retreated so far into myself I was barely present. That evening, I discovered the betrayal went beyond Chelsea's immediate circle. My phone buzzed with a message from a college friend who'd somehow heard about my financial problems through a mutual acquaintance connected to Chelsea. She was offering to help me find a more stable job at her company. Chelsea had broadcast my temporary setback throughout her social network, our family friends, and possibly to our parents, though they hadn't mentioned it directly to me. I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by my artwork and the tools of my profession, and made a decision. The relationship with my sister as it stood was toxic, draining my self-worth and undermining my confidence. Something had to change, and with Chelsea's wedding approaching, I knew exactly how to make that change happen. But first, I needed to secure my own success on my own terms. What Chelsea and my family didn't know, what I had deliberately kept quiet about even before the financial setback, was that I'd been working on a breakthrough project for nearly 18 months. 3 years earlier, I had begun experimenting with combining traditional art techniques with cutting-edge digital technology, creating immersive experiences that bridged the physical and digital worlds. My portfolio contained increasingly sophisticated projects, small at first, then growing in scope and ambition. I'd designed interactive murals for a children's hospital that responded to touch and movement, bringing art to life for young patients. I'd created digital installations for music festivals that translated sound into visual landscapes in real time. My work had been written up in industry publications, though not the glossy magazines Chelsea might read. But my true passion project, the one I'd poured thousands of hours into developing, was something much bigger. I called it Threshold, an immersive art experience that used projection mapping, motion sensors, and custom software to create responsive environments that adapted to human presence and emotion. I'd built a small prototype using my savings, working nights and weekends in a rented studio space. The technology was innovative enough that I'd filed provisional patents, scraping together the legal fees by taking on extra freelance work. The prototype demonstrated how public spaces could be transformed into interactive experiences that changed based on the number of people present, their movements, even their facial expressions. 2 months before Chelsea's wedding announcement, I presented Threshold to Miranda Garcia, founder of Lumina Studios, a cutting-edge art and technology incubator known for backing innovative projects that blended art, technology, and human experience. Miranda had built Lumina from a small gallery into a major force in the digital art world, with locations in New York, San Francisco, and Tokyo. Miranda had been intrigued by my presentation, but cautious. The concept is fascinating, Abigail, but the execution would require substantial investment. We'd need to see more development before committing. I'd spent the following months refining the prototype, enhancing the software, and documenting potential applications. The project that had been canceled, while financially devastating in the short term, had actually freed up time to focus on Threshold. Sometimes, the universe has strange ways of creating opportunity from disaster. 3 weeks after the humiliating bridal shower incident, I received an email from Miranda's assistant requesting an urgent meeting in New York. I spent my last frequent flyer miles on a round-trip ticket and took the earliest train I could afford. Miranda's office overlooked the Hudson River, floor-to-ceiling windows flooding the space with natural light. She greeted me with unexpected warmth. "Abigail, thank you for coming on such short notice. I've been reviewing your updated materials for Threshold." She gestured to her tablet where my presentation was displayed. "We had a situation develop yesterday that I believe creates the perfect opportunity for your project." She explains that a major corporate sponsor had withdrawn from Lumina's upcoming flagship installation in their New York location, leaving an empty exhibition space and budget allocation that needed to be filled quickly. "The timing is tight. We would need to launch in 4 months. But based on your documentation, I believe Threshold could be ready by then, with proper funding and support." My heart raced as she laid out the terms. Full funding for development, a 3-year contract for installations in all Lumina locations, royalties on any commercial applications of the technology, and an upfront payment of $250,000 to secure exclusive rights. "We'll need you to relocate temporarily to oversee installation," Miranda continued. "All expenses covered, of course, plus a monthly stipend. Are these terms agreeable?" I managed to maintain my composure as we discussed details, asking thoughtful questions about timelines and resources, even as my mind spun with the implications. This wasn't just a project deal, it was career-defining, life-changing. The contract arrived by courier the next morning. I reviewed it carefully, had a lawyer friend look it over, and signed. Within 48 hours, the upfront payment hit my bank account, transforming my financial situation overnight. My first instinct was to call my parents or even Chelsea to finally have tangible proof of my success. But something held me back. Years of subtle dismissal and overt condescension couldn't be erased with one check, no matter how large. Instead, I decided to keep my success private, at least until Chelsea's wedding. It wasn't just about revenge, though I can't deny that element existed. It was about reclaiming my narrative, choosing the moment when I would reveal my true professional identity rather than having it filtered through Chelsea's distorted lens. I repaid Chelsea's loan immediately, sending the money with a simple thank you note, offering no explanation for my suddenly improved finances. She texted back a terse "no problem," but didn't ask questions. With my new financial freedom, I made careful preparations for the wedding. I commissioned a gown from Catherine Bailey, an up-and-coming designer whose work I'd admired. The dress would be sophisticated but understated, in a deep emerald silk that complemented my auburn hair. I chose subtle accessories, high quality but not flashy, designed to convey success without desperation. For transportation, I arranged to arrive in a vintage Aston Martin, a nod to our grandfather's love of classic cars, driven by a professional service. It would make a statement without seeming like an obvious attempt to overshadow the bride. I rented a suite at the same luxury hotel where the wedding party was staying, putting myself on equal footing with Chelsea's wealthiest friends. I scheduled appointments for hair, makeup, and a subtle spa treatment the day before. Each decision was calculated not to outshine Chelsea, but to neutralize her power to diminish me. I wasn't planning to announce my success or wave my contract around. Simply arriving as my best, most confident self would be statement enough for those who had bought into Chelsea's portrayal of me as her struggling, unstable sister. As the wedding approached, I threw myself into the Threshold project, working closely with Miranda's team to begin development. The intense focus helped channel my emotional energy into something productive rather than dwelling on Chelsea's betrayal. Each day brought new challenges and victories as the project took shape, reinforcing my confidence in my skills and vision. 1 week before the wedding, Miranda invited me to dinner at her penthouse apartment to discuss progress. Over perfectly cooked salmon and expensive wine, she shared insights from her own career journey. I started Lumina when everyone said physical art spaces were dying, she said, refilling my glass. My family thought I was throwing away my business degree on a hobby. My sister actually organized an intervention. I laughed in surprise. Really? But you've been so successful. Miranda nodded. Now they all claim they supported me from the beginning. That's how it goes. People rewrite history once you succeed. My sister told all her friends I couldn't afford rent. I admit it, the wine loosening my tongue. She has no idea about Threshold or Lumina. And you're not telling her before the wedding? Miranda raised an eyebrow. I thought about it, but no. I'm just going to show up as myself, successful on my own terms. Miranda raised her glass. To showing up as yourself. Sometimes that's the most powerful statement you can make. As I left her apartment that night, I felt a sense of calm resolve replace the hurt and anger I'd been carrying. Chelsea's wedding was no longer a dreaded obligation, but an opportunity to reclaim my dignity. The countdown had begun. The morning of Chelsea's wedding dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the curtains of my hotel suite. I stood at the window, watching workers make final preparations on the immaculate grounds of the Montgomery estate, where Chelsea had spared no expense to create her perfect day. In the months leading up to this moment, I'd rehearsed different scenarios in my mind. Sometimes I imagined a dramatic confrontation, calling Chelsea out publicly for her betrayal. Other times I considered simply not attending, leaving her to explain my absence. But ultimately, I'd chosen a path that felt true to who I was, not who Chelsea or her friends thought I was. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed with a text from Madison, one of the more tolerable bridesmaids. Absolute chaos in bridal suite. Chelsea freaking about flowers. Glad you're getting ready separately. I smiled, grateful for my decision to prepare in peaceful solitude rather than amid the drama of the bridal party. My appointment with the stylist wasn't for another hour, giving me time to center myself and remember Chelsea's most cutting comments for motivation. Abby makes those little animations you see on apps and stuff. Very creative, but not exactly stable. She's 32 and still living like a college student in that tiny apartment. Abby actually asked me for money last month to make rent. $2,000. Can you imagine? Each remembered slight strengthened my resolve. Today wasn't about revenge, but it was about reclaiming my dignity and standing firmly in my truth. The stylist arrived precisely on time, followed by the makeup artist. I'd chosen a look that enhanced rather than transformed, hair swept into an elegant updo that showcased the natural highlights in my auburn hair, makeup that emphasized my green eyes and gave my skin a subtle glow. As they worked, I received increasingly desperate texts from the bridal party. Chelsea was in full meltdown mode over everything from the floral arrangements to a minor stain on the bridal suite carpet. I responded with brief, calming messages, playing my role as supportive sister while maintaining emotional distance. By early afternoon, I stood before the mirror in Catherine's creation, a masterpiece of understated elegance. The emerald silk draped perfectly, the color deepening my eyes and complementing my complexion. The cut was modern but timeless, showing off my figure without being provocative. Around my neck lay a simple pendant of raw emerald set in platinum, a gift to myself to commemorate the threshold contract. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I being petty? Should I downplay my appearance to avoid creating tension on Chelsea's special day? Then I remembered Chelsea's laughter as she told her friends about my financial struggles, the casual cruelty with which she'd undermined my career for years. No, I decided. Showing up as my best self wasn't petty. It was necessary. The Aston Martin arrived precisely on schedule. The driver, professional and discreet, held the door as I slid into the butter-soft leather seat. We proceeded at a leisurely pace toward the Montgomery estate, its manicured grounds now filled with guests in formal attire making their way toward the ceremony site. As we approached the main entrance, I noticed heads turning, curious glances following the distinctive vintage car. The driver pulled up directly to the carpeted walkway, where an attendant waited to direct guests. "Good afternoon, miss," the attendant said as the driver opened my door. "Are you at the bride or groom's party?" "The bride is my sister," I replied, stepping out with practiced grace. The reaction was immediate. Nearby guests paused in their conversations, taking in the car, my dress, my confident demeanor. I recognized several of Chelsea's friends, their expressions shifting from curiosity to confusion to recognition. Abigail? Elizabeth, one of Chelsea's college friends, approached hesitantly. "You look amazing. I almost didn't recognize you." "Thank you." I smiled warmly. "It's been a while. How are you?" As we exchanged pleasantries, I noticed other guests watching, whispering. Elizabeth's husband joined us, introducing himself with unexpected deference. More people drifted into our circle, including several who had been at the bridal shower where Chelsea had exposed my financial situation. The dynamic was subtly, but unmistakably different. Gone were the pitying glances and condescending smiles. Instead, I found myself the center of genuine interest and conversation. As I made my way toward the ceremony area, I overheard a familiar voice. Chelsea's maid of honor, Patricia, was standing with two other bridesmaids near a floral arrangement, partially hidden from the main path. "Wait until you see what she's wearing," Patricia stage whispered, her diamond earrings catching the light as she tossed her perfectly styled hair. "She asked Chelsea for money last month to make rent. Can you imagine showing up to your sister's wedding when you can't afford groceries?" "I heard she borrowed her dress," another bridesmaid added. "Chelsea had to help her pay for that too." I paused, just out of their sight line, a strange calm settling over me. In that moment, their pettiness seemed almost pitiable rather than hurtful. I stepped forward, directly into their line of vision. "Hello, Patricia. Catherine, Brianna. You all look lovely." Their faces froze in almost comical shock as they took in my appearance. Abigail? Patricia recovered first. That dress is unexpected. Thank you, I replied smoothly. Catherine Bailey designed it for me. She's remarkable, isn't she? I mentioned the designer deliberately, knowing Patricia would recognize the name of the industry's rising star, whose waiting list for custom pieces stretched months. You're wearing Catherine Bailey? Catherine, the bridesmaid, asked, her voice rising an octave. She's a dear friend, I said simply. Shall we head to our places? I believe guests are being seated. As I walked away, I heard their hurried whispers resume, no doubt recalibrating their understanding of my status in light of this new information. The ceremony area was a vision of extravagance, with thousands of white roses, crystal chandeliers somehow hung from tree branches, and a string quartet playing softly. Guests were being seated in gilt chairs by white-gloved attendants. I spotted my parents in the front row, Dad in a new tuxedo and Mom in a pale blue designer dress that I suspected Chelsea had selected. They hadn't seen me yet, engaged in conversation with Richard's parents. A wedding coordinator intercepted me before I could approach them. Miss Harris? The bridal party is gathering in the garden pavilion. If you'll follow me? The pavilion was a flurry of activity, bridesmaids adjusting each other's dresses and hair, the photographer capturing candid moments, and in the center, Chelsea, resplendent in a couture gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. She didn't notice me at first, focused on instructing the photographer about specific shots she wanted. When she finally turned and saw me, her expression cycled rapidly through surprise, confusion, and calculation. Abby, you look different. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she took in my appearance. You look beautiful, Chelsea, I said sincerely. The dress is perfect on you. Before she could respond, the wedding planner announced it was time to line up for the processional. Chelsea pulled me aside quickly, her manicured nails digging slightly into my arm. Where did you get that dress? And how did you arrive in an Aston Martin? Are you trying to make some kind of statement at my wedding? I met her gaze calmly. I'm just here to celebrate your special day, Chelsea. The car is from a service, and the dress is new. Nothing more to it than that. She seemed unsatisfied with my answer, but had no time to press further as the music changed, signaling the start of the ceremony. As I processed down the aisle behind the other bridesmaids, I felt the weight of curious stares. Standing at the altar throughout the ceremony, I maintained a serene expression, focusing on the actual purpose of the day, the joining of two people in marriage, whatever my personal feelings about the match might be. Chelsea was radiant as she exchanged vows with Richard, her happiness seemingly genuine. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of something like sadness for the closeness we might have had in another life, one where competition hadn't poisoned our relationship. The ceremony proceeded without incident, but throughout the formal photo session that followed, I noticed Chelsea watching me with barely concealed suspicion and confusion. Her perfect day was proceeding exactly as planned, yet something was off script, something she couldn't control, and it clearly unsettled her. As we posed for the final family photos, my father leaned in and whispered, "You look stunning, Abby. That color is magnificent on you." It was the most specific compliment he'd given me in years, and I treasured it even as I prepared for the reception, where the real confrontation would inevitably unfold. The wedding reception was held in an enormous tent transformed into a crystal palace, with thousands of twinkling lights, ice sculptures, and centerpieces that combined orchids with what appeared to be actual pearl strands. A 16-piece orchestra played as guests found their assigned tables, each marked with an engraved crystal placeholder. I was seated at a table with distant cousins and family friends rather than with the wedding party or immediate family, a placement I suspected was deliberate on Chelsea's part. However, the strategic distancing backfired almost immediately. "Abigail, we haven't seen you in ages," my mother's college roommate Diana exclaimed as I took my seat. "Chelsea tells us you're some kind of computer artist?" "I'm a digital experience designer," I explained, using the opportunity to share a brief, accessible description of my work. "I create interactive art installations that respond to human presence and emotion." "That sounds fascinating," Diana's husband commented. Is that what you were wearing in that emerald pendant? It looked like raw stone. I touched the pendant at my throat. Yes, it's an uncut emerald. It represents my newest project, which uses natural elements as inspiration for digital landscapes. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily as I shared just enough about Threshold to sound interesting without revealing proprietary details. Within minutes, the entire table was engaged, asking thoughtful questions and sharing their own experiences with interactive art. As dinner progressed, I noticed other guests stopping by our table specifically to meet me, word having somehow spread about my work. A tech entrepreneur asked for my card. A museum board member mentioned an upcoming installation they were planning. The mother of the groom came by specifically to tell me she'd heard about my fascinating work and wanted to learn more. Across the room, Chelsea was clearly aware of the unexpected attention I was receiving. During the salad course, I caught her watching our table, her expression a mixture of confusion and annoyance. During the main course, she sent Richard over, ostensibly to check that everything was to our satisfaction, but I suspected to investigate why my table had become a surprising hub of activity. Your sister tells me you're in digital design? Richard said when the conversation provided an opening. That must be interesting work. It is, I confirmed. Actually, I just signed a major contract with Lumina Studios for a multi-year installation project. Richard's eyebrows rose. Lumina? Miranda Garcia's company? That's impressive. They're very selective about their collaborations. You know Miranda? I asked, genuinely surprised. We have mutual connections in the art investment world. Her last featured artist's work increased in value 400% in 18 months. He studied me with new interest. I'd love to hear more about your project sometime. I'd be happy to discuss it, I replied, handing him my business card, which he accepted with unexpected respect. As Richard returned to the head table, I saw him speaking intently to Chelsea, whose expression darkened as she looked in my direction. The dynamic continued to shift throughout the evening. People who had barely acknowledged me at the ceremony now sought me out. Chelsea's friends, who had whispered about my financial struggles, now attempted to engage me in conversation, their tone noticeably warmer. Patricia, the maid of honor who had made the grocery comment, approached during dessert. Abigail, I had no idea you were working with Lumina Studios. That's amazing. My husband and I visited their Tokyo location last year. It's a recent development, I said neutrally. We should get coffee sometime. I'm on the board of a children's foundation that's looking to create more interactive experiences for our fundraising events. I smiled politely. Feel free to email me. My schedule is quite full with the Lumina project, but I'm always happy to offer recommendations for other designers who might be available. Patricia's smile faltered slightly at my gentle rebuff, but she pressed on. Of course. I just thought since we're practically family now with Chelsea and Richard. Being family doesn't automatically entitle people to professional favors, I replied, my tone still pleasant but firm. Something I've learned through experience. She had the grace to look embarrassed, clearly catching my reference to how family connections hadn't extended to protecting my dignity when I faced financial challenges. As the night progressed toward the traditional speeches, I prepared myself for my role as bridesmaid. When the MC called my name, I approached the microphone with calm confidence, the notes I'd prepared tucked in my hand. For those who don't know me, I'm Abigail, Chelsea's sister. I began. When Chelsea asked me to speak tonight, I thought about all the stories I could tell from our childhood, the competitive games, the borrowed clothes, the shared secrets. I paused, looking directly at Chelsea. But what I really want to talk about is growth. Chelsea and I took different paths in life, made different choices, valued different things. Those differences sometimes created distance between us. But what I've learned, what I hope we've both learned, is that success comes in many forms, and true happiness isn't found in possessions or appearances, but in being authentic to yourself and your values. I raise my glass. To Chelsea and Richard, may your marriage be built on mutual respect, honest communication, and the courage to see and accept each other completely, both in moments of struggle and in moments of triumph. The toast was met with warm applause, many guests nodding in appreciation of the sentiment. Chelsea's expression was unreadable, though Richard raised his glass directly to me in what seemed like genuine acknowledgement. As the reception transitioned to dancing, Chelsea finally approached me directly, pulling me into a quiet corner of the tent. "What is going on, Abby?" she demanded, her voice low but intense. "Everyone's talking about you and some big art project. Richard says Lumina Studios is a big deal. When did this happen? Why didn't you tell me?" "It happened recently," I said simply. "And I didn't tell you because you were busy with wedding planning. Besides, you've never shown much interest in my career before." "That's not fair," she protested. "I've always supported you." "Have you?" I asked quietly. "Was it supportive to tell all your friends I couldn't afford rent? Or groceries? To make me sound irresponsible and unstable when I had one temporary setback?" Chelsea had the grace to look away. "I shouldn't have shared that. But I was worried about you." "No, you weren't," I countered, keeping my voice calm. "You were enjoying feeling superior. You've been doing it for years, Chelsea. Diminishing my work, my choices, my life, to make yours seem more impressive." "That's ridiculous," she scoffed, but there was uncertainty in her eyes. "Is it? When was the last time you asked me about my work with genuine interest? When was the last time you introduced me to someone without qualifying my career as something small or unstable or just a hobby?" Chelsea didn't answer immediately. The music swelled around us, guests laughing and dancing, unaware of our intense exchange. "I didn't realize you felt that way," she finally said. "I know. That's part of the problem." I softened my tone. "Look, this is your wedding day. I'm not here to create drama. I just wanted to be seen for once, really seen, not as your struggling sister, but as the successful professional I am." Chelsea studied me, something like realization dawning in her expression. "The dress, the car, the pendant, this was all planned, wasn't it? To make a statement. Not to overshadow you," I clarified. "Just to reclaim my own narrative." Before she could respond, Richard appeared, looking between us with concern. "Everything okay here?" "They're about to cut the cake." Chelsea hesitated, then plastered on her perfect smile. "Of course. Abby and I were just having a sister moment." As they walked away, I noticed Chelsea glance back at me, her expression thoughtful and perhaps a little sad. Something had shifted between us, but whether it was a breaking or a beginning remained to be seen. As the reception continued into the night, I found myself surrounded by unexpected conversations and connections. Richard's father, Lawrence Williams, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes, sought me out specifically. "Ms. Harris, forgive the intrusion, but Richard mentioned your work with Lumina Studios. I've been an admirer of Miranda Garcia's vision for years." We fell into a surprisingly engaging discussion about the intersection of art and technology, Lawrence revealing himself to be knowledgeable and genuinely interested. Unlike many of Chelsea's friends who had suddenly discovered my existence, his curiosity seemed authentic rather than opportunistic. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "Richard has always had an interest in supporting innovative art. It's something we share, though he doesn't often get to explore it in his current role. Perhaps your project might spark that passion again." I considered this unexpected insight into my new brother-in-law. I had no idea Richard was interested in art. Chelsea never mentioned it. Lawrence smiled somewhat sadly. "There are many aspects of Richard that don't fit neatly into the society role he's assumed. Perhaps having you as a sister-in-law will allow him to reconnect with those interests." This conversation revealed a new dimension to consider, the possibility that Richard, like me, had aspects of himself that remained hidden or undervalued in Chelsea's curated world. Later, as I took a moment of quiet near one of the ornate floral arrangements, my mother appeared beside me, elegant in her designer dress, but with a hesitant expression I rarely saw. "You look beautiful tonight, Abby," she said softly. "That color always was perfect on you." "Thanks, Mom." She fidgeted with her champagne glass. "Your speech was lovely. Very thoughtful." I meant every word. Mom was silent for a moment, then said, "Your father and I had no idea about your new project." It sounds impressive. Richard's father couldn't stop talking about it. I turned to face her directly. Would you like to hear about it? What followed was the most genuine conversation I'd had with my mother in years. She asked questions about Threshold, listened without interrupting, and even offered insights from her experience as an educator about how such interactive technology might benefit students with different learning styles. Why didn't you tell us about this opportunity? She finally asked. The question was simple, but loaded with unspoken history. I chose my words carefully. I guess I got used to my work being treated as less important or successful than Chelsea's career. It seemed easier not to share until I had something so significant it couldn't be dismissed. My mother's face fell. Have we made you feel that way? That your work wasn't important? Not intentionally, I assured her. But yes, sometimes. The way you and Dad would get so excited about Chelsea's corporate promotions or social connections, while my projects received polite interest at best. Oh, Abby. Mom's eyes grew moist. We never meant to compare you. We've always been proud of your creativity and independence. We just didn't always understand your work the way we understood Chelsea's. And maybe that's on me too, I acknowledged. I could have made more effort to share it in accessible ways. We stood together in companionable silence, watching the dancers on the floor, including my father, who was attempting a somewhat awkward but enthusiastic foxtrot with one of the aunts. Would you and Dad like to come to New York when the installation opens? I offered. I could show you around, explain everything in person. Mom's face lit up. We'd love that. Truly. As she excused herself to rescue Dad from his dance partner, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't fully acknowledged was there. The desire for parental approval never quite disappears, no matter how independent we become. Throughout the evening, I also observed Chelsea more carefully, seeing nuances I'd previously missed or ignored. Despite the picture-perfect wedding and her apparent triumph as social hostess, there were moments when her smile slipped, revealing something like uncertainty beneath. During the father-daughter dance, I noticed her whispering urgently to Richard when she thought no one was watching, his reassuring nod seeming practiced and automatic rather than engaged. When her college friends gathered for photos, I caught a flash of calculation in her expression as she positioned herself among them, a conscious curation of image rather than natural joy. Most revealing was a moment I witnessed purely by accident. Stepping out for fresh air, I rounded a corner of the tent and saw Chelsea alone, checking her phone with fierce concentration, her face tight with what looked like anxiety. When she noticed me, she quickly tucked the device away and resumed her radiant bride persona, but not before I glimpsed what seemed like falling stock prices on the screen. These observations didn't erase the hurt of her betrayal, but they added complexity to my understanding of my sister. Perhaps her need to diminish me came from a place of insecurity rather than malice. Perhaps her perfect life wasn't as perfect as it appeared. As the reception neared its conclusion, I found myself in conversation with Gabriel, Richard's cousin and one of the groomsmen, a thoughtful architect whose genuine interest in design had made him one of the more pleasant members of the wedding party. "I've been thinking about what you said in your toast," he remarked as we watched the last dancers on the floor. "About success coming in many forms. That resonated with me. I'm glad. I was on track to be a corporate lawyer like my father," he confided. 3 years into a soul-crushing job at a top firm, I quit to pursue architecture. My family thought I was having a breakdown. I laughed in recognition. "Let me guess, they've since taken credit for your success?" "Naturally. Now my father tells everyone he always knew I had a creative calling." Selective memory is a powerful thing. We shared a knowing smile, and in that moment of connection, I realized something important. The validation I'd been seeking all evening, the recognition of my worth and success, didn't actually need to come from Chelsea or even my parents. There were people who would see and value me authentically, without the distorting lens of family history or social competition. As the night drew to a close, Chelsea and Richard prepared for their grand exit, guests lining up with sparklers to send them off to their honeymoon. I joined the line, accepting a sparkler from an attendant. Chelsea paused as she passed me, breaking away from Richard momentarily to whisper in my ear, "We need to talk when I get back from Bora Bora." I nodded, neither agreeing nor refusing, simply acknowledging that yes, eventually, we would need to have a real conversation about our relationship and how to move forward. As I watched their car disappear down the estate's long driveway, sparklers illuminating the night around me, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I had come to the wedding expecting confrontation and perhaps vindication. I was leaving with something more valuable: perspective. My Aston Martin service arrived right on schedule. As I slipped into the back seat, I took one last look at the Montgomery estate, its windows still glowing with celebration. The evening had been transformative, but not in the way I'd anticipated. The silence I'd wanted to create wasn't about shocking Chelsea or her friends with my success. It was about silencing the critical voice inside myself that had for too long measured my worth through my sister's eyes. That voice was quiet now, replaced by something stronger and more authentic. Whatever came next with Chelsea, I would face it standing firmly in my own truth. The weeks following Chelsea's wedding brought a whirlwind of activity as I relocated temporarily to New York to oversee Threshold's installation at Lumina's flagship gallery. I threw myself into the work, collaborating with engineers, lighting designers, and programmers to bring my vision to life. 3 weeks after the wedding, the first media coverage of Threshold appeared in a prominent technology magazine, featuring an interview with Miranda and me about the project's innovative approach to responsive environments. The article included my photo and a brief bio emphasizing my background and previous work. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Chelsea. "Just saw the article in TechCurrent. Congrats. Call me when you have time." I let the message sit unanswered for several days, not out of spite, but because I genuinely needed space to process our relationship without her influence. When I finally did call, Chelsea answered on the first ring. "Abby, I was beginning to think you were ignoring me." "Just busy with the installation," I replied. "How is Bora Bora?" "Gorgeous, of course. Listen, I've been thinking about what happened at the wedding and things you said." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I didn't realize how I've been making you feel all these years. Richard actually pointed it out, said I talk about you like you're still a struggling college student, not a professional adult." It was surprising to hear Chelsea acknowledge this behavior, even more surprising that Richard had been the one to call it out. "It's been a pattern for a long time," I said simply. "I know that now. And I'm sorry, Abby. Truly. I think maybe I needed to feel like I was doing better than you to validate my own choices." The admission was more self-aware than I'd expected for my sister. We talked for nearly an hour, the conversation sometimes uncomfortable but more honest than we'd been with each other in years. Chelsea revealed pressures in her own life I hadn't fully appreciated: the constant stress of maintaining her social status, Richard's family's high expectations, and some concerning investments that weren't performing as expected. "Your life suddenly seemed so free in comparison," she admitted. "Following your passion, creating meaningful work, not answering to anyone." "It hasn't been easy," I reminded her. "There were plenty of sleepless nights wondering if I could pay my bills." "I know. And instead of supporting you through that, I used it to make myself feel superior. That was wrong of me." We ended the call with tentative plans to meet when she visited New York for a charity event the following month. It wasn't immediate reconciliation, but it was a start. As Threshold progressed toward its opening, my parents came to visit as promised. I gave them a private tour of the installation in progress, explaining the technology and concepts in ways they could understand and appreciate. "This is extraordinary, Abby," my father said, watching in wonder as the digital environment responded to his movements. "I had no idea this was what you meant by interactive design. This is art and science together." "We're so proud of you," my mother added, squeezing my hand. "We always have been, but I think we didn't always show it the right way." Over dinner that evening, we had a difficult but necessary conversation about the family dynamics that had hurt me. "We never meant to favor Chelsea," Dad insisted. "Her path was just more conventional, easier for us to understand and talk about. And maybe we worried more about you because your career seemed less secure," Mom added. That worry might have come across as lack of confidence in your choices. It did, I confirmed gently. I felt like I had to prove myself constantly, while Chelsea got automatic approval. They listened, really listened, perhaps for the first time hearing how their well-intentioned concern had translated to perceived favoritism. By the end of their visit, something had shifted in our relationship. They would never fully understand my world, but they were making a genuine effort to see and value it on its own terms. In the months that followed, Threshold opened to critical acclaim. The New York Times called it a breakthrough in experiential art, while technology publications praised its innovative use of responsive algorithms. Visitors lined up around the block, their social media posts creating organic buzz that extended far beyond the art world. Miranda was ecstatic. "We're expanding the installation to San Francisco 3 months ahead of schedule," she announced during our weekly meeting. "And Tokyo is already preparing their space. You've created something extraordinary, Abigail." My professional success brought unexpected personal developments as well. I received an invitation to join the board of a prestigious art and technology foundation. Former colleagues reached out to collaborate. I was asked to give a TED Talk about the intersection of art, technology, and human emotion. Through it all, I maintained perspective about what truly mattered. Success was gratifying, but it didn't define my worth any more than struggle had. The validation I'd once desperately sought from Chelsea and my family now seemed less crucial as I built a community of people who appreciated me for exactly who I was. Chelsea and I established a new pattern of communication, speaking every few weeks, our conversations increasingly honest, if sometimes still awkward. During her New York visit, she came to experience Threshold, bringing Richard, who showed genuine enthusiasm for the project. "This is remarkable work, Abigail," he said afterward, business card already in hand to share with art investor friends. "You've created something truly unique." Chelsea was quieter, taking in the experience with an expression I couldn't quite read. As Richard stepped away to take a call, she turned to me. "You know what I realized watching people interact with your creation? You've always seen the world differently than I do. I used to think that was a weakness, but it's actually your greatest strength." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, and for now, that was enough. 6 months after the wedding, I invited my parents and Chelsea for coffee at my new apartment in Brooklyn, a spacious loft with large windows perfect for my creative process. As we sat together, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in years, I reflected on everything that had transpired since that fateful wedding day. The journey hadn't been about proving Chelsea wrong or showing up in a fancy dress to silence gossip. It had been about reclaiming my narrative, standing firmly in my authentic self, and finding peace with my family on new, more equal terms. "You know," I said as we finished our coffee, "I've learned something important through all of this. Success isn't about silencing critics or winning competitions. It's about being true to yourself and your vision, even when others don't understand or value it yet."
Chelsea nodded thoughtfully.
"And family isn't about being the same or even always understanding each other. It's about respecting our differences and supporting each other anyway." My mother smiled, tears in her eyes. "My girls are both so wise now. When did that happen?" We laughed together, the sound filling my sunlit apartment with promise. The road ahead wouldn't be perfect, and old patterns wouldn't disappear overnight, but we had taken the first steps toward a healthier relationship, one built on mutual respect rather than competition. As I walked them out later, Chelsea hugged me goodbye, whispering, "I'm really proud of you, Abby. I should have said that a long time ago." The words warmed me, not because I needed her approval anymore, but because they signified growth for both of us. That evening, alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop to begin sketching concepts for my next project. The screen reflected my face, and I noticed something different in my expression, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Sometimes, the most powerful statement isn't made with grand gestures or perfect revenge. Sometimes, it's simply showing up as your authentic self, standing firmly in your truth, and letting that truth speak for itself. The silence that follows isn't the awkward hush of confrontation, but the peaceful quiet of self-acceptance, of knowing your worth isn't determined by others' perceptions, but by your own journey of growth and discovery. Have you ever had a family member or friend who constantly diminished your dreams or choices?
How did you handle it?
Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that their path is valid, even when others don't understand it. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, true success isn't measured by others' approval, but by your own fulfillment and growth.